think we're live. And we're live. There we go. Just tied in a few things up on my end for the stream. We had, I wasn't paying attention. I need to go back through my comments here. But somebody had mentioned an issue with n8n yesterday, and I wish I'd have been paying a little bit more attention. I could go back into my comments and figure out what the exact issue was. It sounded like it was an API integration issue in n8n. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's just tie into this and see what. I've only looked at n8n briefly. I downloaded the community version a while ago and tried it out just very briefly locally, but that was a few months ago. It's been a little while since I've actually played with this. So I thought, well, let's just dive back in today. There's a few systems I want to look at. One that keeps popping up, I think it's been around a little bit longer as well, is called Cassidy. So today I'm kind of having a look at some of these agentic systems, Cassidy, and then one that came up on our live stream yesterday was called Taskade. And so I thought it would be cool to just sort of poke away at some of these, pick a, like maybe just like a simple use case, something that we want to build out really quickly. Won't take a whole lot of time. n8n.io. I was looking at one thing. I can't help but always go and check out the pricing page when I'm looking at these tools. And seriously, we're in that era right now where there's stuff popping up left, right, and center, because it's if you're starting out in tech right now, or interested in AI, you're interested in automation, you're interested in getting into some of these tools, it's never been in a lot of ways, it's never been more accessible. Even for me, we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I am a software engineer. My background's in software. I've been in software for about 25 years. And the AI tools make things more accessible for me because I'm not up on the most modern CSS frameworks, Tailwind and various systems, or even just like I was talking about yesterday, I'm working in a system that's Bootstrap. I'm working with a client who's working in Bootstrap right now. I haven't worked in Bootstrap for years. And so the thing that the AI systems allow me to do is they give me access to this. So I don't have to even read the documentation most times anymore. I can just get in there and start doing stuff. And I can tell, because I have worked with Bootstrap, I have worked with CSS, so I can tell if it looks right. But CSS has evolved a lot in the last even 5, 6, 10 years. Like a lot. There's a lot of stuff you can do with CSS now that I just haven't kept up with, but I don't need to worry about that so much. So all that is to say that if you're thinking about getting into it, the thing you really need to sort of understand, if you want to build out your own product, or you're tinkering with whether it's using like lovable.dev, I think bolt.new is another one. I'm seeing people following a few creators on here that are building out their first sort of products, and they're like, I'm not a coder, but I'm building this out. And I think that's really cool, because the interesting thing is that if that's you and you're the one that's doing that, your experience, the skills that you're bringing to that process of building out your product, if you're not a developer, are the same skills that I'm using building out my products as a developer, because I'm also not really writing code anymore. I'm just thinking about the business problem, which is something that, 10 years ago, before we had all these AI tools, I was doing both of, our software teams are doing kind of both those jobs, but actually more focused on the software. And often we wouldn't understand the business side of things as much. And there's actually, in larger organizations, there's a problem there. There's a real problem there where software teams don't understand the bigger picture, or there's not really great communication between those teams. But if you're building out your own system today. If you're thinking about, I've been thinking about an idea for a piece of software, a product. I saw somebody building out a directory of AI tools yesterday. I think it was Meg, which is like super cool. And Meg said, I'm not a developer. I worked in, I think she said, marketing, doing MMA kind of stuff. Hope I'm not misquoting Meg, but right. But like dabbling now in software development. And I just think that's super cool because it really outlines what I think is a key skill. So I'll just say this out loud. If you are thinking about tech, there's a couple of things that are really important to get into technology. Maybe three. Curiosity, because like there's so much stuff out there. Determination, because there's a lot of rabbit holes, and it's very easy to get into a position or a scenario where you're fighting a hard problem for an hour. I saw that on Meg's stream yesterday where she was saying, I've been fighting this problem for an hour. And I just wanted to say out loud, if you're doing that, if you're building something out, you're just writing code or getting AI to write your code for the first time and you're, fighting it a little bit over and over again, that's not a new experience. That's the software experience. You keep sort of smashing your head against a problem until you come out the other side. That's just sort of part and parcel. And even now, again, as a software engineer using AI every day, I use Cursor every single day, and I still fight it. I still fight the problem. I still fight the AI. That's just a part of the process. So curiosity and determination. And I always said an aptitude. People ask me all the time, what do you need to get into tech? And I say aptitude. Aptitude meaning if you see something, be curious and dive into it. I think you could probably get into a tech. There's probably some slices of tech where you could get in just into one thing and just do that one thing and be good at it and have maybe like a career like embedded systems, right? I think there will always be a career in embedded systems. There will always be a career in security. But again, both of those are actually fairly broad aspects of tech. And tech is a very, very broad field. But for me, being, building software and being on the internet and tinkering with AI and doing all this kind of stuff, my day job is tinkering. My day job is, oh, there's a cool new thing. Let's go look at that. And because I have experience, most of the concepts usually make sense. If not, I'll go on YouTube. A friend of mine says, taught me this phrase, YouTube certified. That's sort of me, YouTube certified. I spend a lot of time on YouTube figuring stuff out. But that's the tech experience, that's the tech skill set in my mind, is that there are so many tools. And now, especially with AI, there are so many tools out there, like literally popping out of the woodwork every single day. So that's what brought us to where we are today. There's a few things. Somebody mentioned n8n yesterday on the stream. So I thought, let's go look at this. It's been a couple months since I've looked at it. And I don't remember who it was. I apologize. I lost the comment. I got to go back and dig through my TikTok live and find the comment. Somebody said specifically they were having trouble n8n integrating an API, I think it was. And so I thought, that's cool. Let's go have a look at n8n. And then there were a couple other ones that come up. This other one came up yesterday on the stream, Taskade. It also looks like a bit of an agentic system. And then another one that keeps popping up over and over again is this Cassidy. And I thought, you know what, let's just poke at these a little bit. We'll just take like a really basic use case, just something really simple. And we'll just poke at these a little bit and see how far we can get with it. n8n feels to me more like, I downloaded the community version of this a while ago and was playing with it. And it feels a bit more like, so I use make.com a lot because I like things to be fairly simple. I like to keep my automation simple. I like my, when I write software, I keep my software simple. And that's experience that teaches me this. Because when you're building out systems, and I mean, I don't mean any disrespect to other creators on here or whatever. I see these really elaborate, multi-dozen node workflow automations, and I'm like, that's fine. But when something goes wrong with that, you got to go in there and fix it, right? Or what's worse is you're going to walk away from that automation 6 months later, you can be like, oh, this isn't working. And I forgot completely what it does. You have to go in and relearn the whole thing. And that's my experience in all business and software is that complexity inevitably grows over time. And so my job as a senior software engineer is to reduce the complexity of any given system to the smallest amount possible so that we can maintain that system over time. We don't want, and maybe the stakes have changed now that we have AI. We can spin up new systems fairly quickly, but there are some things we want to last. We want longevity, like at least months or maybe years out of our systems. Maybe that's not realistic anymore, but I can't help but bring that approach to my engineering, my work. If you think about different engineering fields, if you just build things, skyscrapers that only lasted for 2 years, the software is a little bit more nebulous. It's a little bit more malleable than that. But we don't want our businesses to last a short time. We want to try and build systems that have longevity, and we can still change and manipulate over time. And in order to do that, we need to keep our systems small. Hey, welcome to the live, everyone. I got a few comments here. I'm going to just circle back on some of these comments. Got a few here. Hey, Artie. Artie says, content and perspective are invaluable. I'm glad you're getting something out of it. I really am. Caleb says, I'm dedicated. That's awesome. That's really important if you're in the tech fields. Just a commitment to, I mean, you don't have to, but just be aware that when you get into tech, the only thing that's constant in the field of the very broad field of technology is change. Everything changes. That's in the all of the time I've been in software, things just constantly change. And that's what when you talk about DevOps, you hear about that DevOps job. That's DevOps job is literally just helping get products out the door faster. DevOps is a product that infrastructure teams offer to development teams to help manage that change. Corey, hey, welcome, Corey. Good to see you again. The way Aaron speaks and explains is very easy to listen and understand. That was a hard-learned lesson for me. And so I'm glad I really appreciate that feedback from you because it took me a long time to understand. I've definitely been on the side of the fence where, because I like tech, I like the details. I've always been kind of a computer nerd and liked all of the details. And so I've always been very detail focused and detail oriented. But the problem with that is I've also learned very slowly, very slowly over time, I've learned that communication is more important. And so if you can distill information into a way that everybody can understand, because everybody's got their own specializations. It's not that those marketing people don't care about tech, and it's not that those salespeople don't care about tech. It's that they have their own specialized knowledge in their own areas. And so if you can get on the same page and be able to communicate, I think that's a highly valuable skill. At least my experience tells me that. So I'm glad some of this is getting across. That means I'm maybe taking the right approach here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 says, does that scare you? I missed that question. If you could rephrase that one or circle back to it, I'd appreciate that. AI agents in the real sense of agent aren't here yet. Yeah, I agree with that. Most of them are AI. I mean, they're agentic, I guess. We're going to debate about what those terms mean for a while. I'm more interested in something that I can, even if it is an agent, quote unquote, an agent, my focus is just, can I give a simple task to something and then have it come back and have it work? That's all I'm really interested right now. So we can call it an assistant, an agent, whatever. I guess maybe agent, we move from assistant to agent when we start to incorporate multiple steps in the process. And so I would still call that like a workflow, but if we have a bunch of decision points in there, and that's really the right place for AI, is we're using AI as a decider in our workflow. Some data comes in, we need to make a decision and then pick a path based on the outputs of that particular decider. We can program those deciders in a programming language, and we do when we build out smart workflows or workflow systems. We build deciders in there. AI gives us the ability to build out a little bit smarter deciders, have the inputs be a little bit more fuzzy, which opens up some interesting use cases. Still catching up on my comments here. We're going to tie into some of these agentic type systems here right away. Do you know of a tool that lets you control the prompts of the entire AI agent? I maybe. I don't know if I guess it depends on my question is, what is your use case? I know I've used a tool called VoiceFlow, which is more oriented towards bots and stuff, but they have a workflow engine in there and they allow you to control all of the different prompts. I feel like you have control over the prompts. I need to understand your question a little bit more. I don't quite know I have a great answer for that. DSPY is an end-to-end system prompt optimization framework in Python. Thank you for that. I will check that out. DSPy. And then there's a thing that's really fun about, if you work in the Python world, you have to incorporate pi in there somewhere. Sorry, that's tongue-in-cheek. Corey says, just saw a demonstration of text to CAD AI. I have not tinkered with that, but that sounds interesting. What's really cool is we're starting to see some development and some really interesting. I've been sort of griping for a while that there aren't a lot of really good use cases for AI, but we're starting to see some pop out now. The interesting thing is, I saw Matt Framer the other day showing off some of the text to 3D model AI, and I think that's super cool. That's a really interesting use case. I see a lot of the text to video stuff out there, and I know people talk about maybe B-roll and stuff. I know we're still developing that field. I don't have a really good use case for it yet, and I think it's more of a novelty. Text to CAD generation, that's really interesting, especially if you could get it to, if you could train that in a way that it would spit out a fairly reliable template or cover. Again, it's never going to do the whole job, but if it could cover, I mean, CAD is one of those involved processes, right? If you could cover 25, 50, 60% of the work you needed to do, or just the setup or whatever that looks like, might be a real time saver. In some cases, AI can be a little bit more novel, but yeah, we're starting to see some interesting use cases come out. Agents are fully autonomous. That makes sense. Yeah, and I don't kind of fully autonomous anything in the stuff that I do, because if you follow me at all, you will understand that I bring a very skeptical approach to AI, in that I use it every day, but I don't let AI do anything autonomously. I use it as cheap intelligence to get started or fast track a process, especially when we deal with more complexity or more risk. Then the less I will trust what I'm getting back. Your tech sister says, hello, UI UX designer looking to learn about AI agents. Do I need to learn software dev first? No, not at all. You definitely don't. If you want to get into sort of agentic stuff, the thing there's two things I think you need to, or want to think about. You want to think about logic, how, understanding logic a little bit, which might feel software dev-ish, but it's more so just like, if this, then this. When you start getting into workflows or systems, we were talking loosely about agents, not fully autonomous necessarily. The part in the workflow where we want, let me pull up Whimsical, because we'll talk about this for a second. I just discovered this Whimsical thing. It's kind of cool. Very simple flowcharting system. So this is what we were working on yesterday. Let's spin up a brand new file, a new board, and we'll just do this with a couple of things here. Let me see if I can close that side pane and get rid of that. If we have some kind of input here, right? If you think about your process, if you're about to build out an agent or a workflow, regardless, you sort of have, and this is the most simplest way you might approach this. We use this little diamond. This is a decision, okay? This is sort of a yes or no. And if you understand inherently sort of how workflows work, then this will probably make sense to you. This one here will change. So we have some sort of input. It could be anything. And then we sort of have like a yes case on our decision, and we have a no case. This is the most simplest. And so if it's a yes case, we're going to do A, and if it's a no case, we're going to do B. Now, of course, this can build out and be a lot more involved. Our workflows can be more involved in this, but whenever we're building out scenarios, The place where AI comes in where it's really handy is when we have this decision part of the process. When we have to make a decision, this is a great use for AI. And again, if you've built out workflows before, or if you've worked on any kind of business process diagrams or anything, this shouldn't be totally foreign to you. But when you think about agentic systems, or when you think about developing stuff, I would encourage people to think about it in this way. What are your inputs? And then what decisions do you have to make in your processes? Because understanding your decisions and understanding where the flows in your business processes are, if you get that already, then you're already in a good spot. You don't need to know software, right? This is just logic. If this happens, if this decision is made and it's a yes, then go here. And if the decision is made and it's a no, then go here. Or it could be 3 ways or 7 different ways you go. We start to get into logic and loops and things like that. So it's an understanding of the higher level logic, I think, is what's important. And then if you need to get into some of the lower level kind of, quote unquote, dev stuff, then you can. But yeah, you definitely don't need to have a deep understanding of dev. And you know what? If you're using ChatGPT or something, it can help you along the way sort of answer those questions. What does this mean if you run into something you don't know or want to get further into it? Devraj says, we use Blue Prism and it's awful. Also introduced myself to Power Automate. If that's another thing I'll mention, if you have recommendations for it. So today we're looking at, hopefully we get into it. Wanted to tinker with n8n a little bit because that came up yesterday. And I've also been looking at Cassidy. And then I've also been looking at, this other one came up yesterday, Taskade. This seems like there's probably a bit of overlap in these. They do similar things and have maybe different sort of value propositions. But if you have systems that you're using, if you have maybe a workflow or an agentic kind of system you're using right now and you enjoy it, let me know. Because, I only tinker with these a little bit. I tend to sort of build out my workflows in something like make.com and keep them fairly simple. But I do play with more advanced systems like this. And I do believe it's important to understand how these work. Again, I like to keep my stuff fairly simple because experience tells me that we need to maintain these things, right? 6 months from now, when we come back in and go, what did I do here? How does this work again? Or some of those integrations don't, APIs have deprecated or whatever changes have happened on it's the one thing that is constant on the internet is change. If anything's going to happen on the internet, change is going to happen. Coffee X Ambition says, which AI agent frameworks do you think are going too fast? Crew AI. I don't have an opinion because you just learned about it right now. I think I've heard of this before. Again, the leading multi-agent platform. I sort of feel like the entire AI space is moving a little bit too fast in the sense that we don't, without getting into a rant on the software side, the software industry as a whole has moved way too fast in the last couple decades. And not the biggest fan of, Bob Martin, but one of the things that he says is, we just haven't killed enough people with software for the regulators to step in. Because if you think about software, as opposed to something like mechanical engineering, right? If you took all of the risks in mechanical engineering that we do with software today, buildings and bridges would fall down all over the place. And in the beginning, they probably did. You think about the early days of mechanical engineering, right? And I mean, occasionally a bridge still does malfunction, right? Or a building has some kind of critical malfunction or something. Like, it doesn't happen very often because that engineering field has evolved. Software hasn't. The software industry is so new and is still moving just like ridiculously fast. And one of the unfortunate things about the software industry, from my perspective, in my opinion, is the startup culture, right? The VC culture, where we're not really building software because we're trying to solve an interesting problem. We're throwing money at these startups that sometimes have absurd ideas. They just we don't need a smart toilet. Let's just be honest, right? We could be putting these resources to much better use. But really what they are is just anybody with an idea that has connections in the VC world. They're just kind of throwing these $1 million darts at them to see which one turns into a lot of money. That's what our industry's become. And unfortunately, we're seeing that right now also with AI. That's only exacerbated this problem. So you'll find if you follow me, you'll find that I try to bring a more practical, a skeptical approach to some of this stuff, because some of this tech we don't need. Like, if we're just being perfectly honest, this is just sort of enabling the wrong type of innovation in some ways. Like I saw yesterday, there was a conversation about the scams and the attacks that are happening out there right now are just getting more and more. The AI has enabled these crews, these malicious crews that are perpetrating these different scams and attacks just to move faster. And so that the only way we're going to be able to counter that eventually was with AI on the defense side. And that's a terrifying thought for me as somebody who's worked in security and security engineering and the cloud infrastructure and all that kind of stuff. Because if our defense against bad actors with AI systems is AI, that puts us in a really vulnerable position, because AI is non-deterministic. Like, my comment on that video was like, a mistake on the attacker's side from an AI perspective is low risk, but a mistake on the defender's side from AI doing the wrong thing is really super high risk. And so we're not taking the time to think these things through. We've sort of committed to the idea that we have no choice but to race forward with this technology as fast as we can. And I think that's really unfortunate. It means that the regulators will catch up about a decade from now after all of the mess has been made. Oh, I got a whole bunch of comments here. I'm going to try and get caught up again. DeepSeek V3, I haven't touched it. Honestly, I know people are, I get this question a lot. Which model do I like better? I don't need a smarter model. I like the idea of cheaper, but you got to keep in mind that 9 times out of 10, the questions or the problems, we go back to my little chart here. I'm using AI for this problem right here. Let me just draw. I want this to be a circle. I want it to be an outline. And I want it to have a red. Let's do that. Pink works. Purple, whatever that is. The problem I'm solving with AI is this one right? Oh, let me try this. Come on. Cooperate. There. This decision. That's what I'm doing. I'm making this decision with AI in some kind of, we're talking a little bit about agents today, but like a workflow. I have a decision in a workflow that needs to be made. These are not hard decisions. I am not giving my AI hard decisions, so I don't need a smarter model. A cheaper model would be good, but 50% of the things that I do, I can solve with GPT-3.5. And then the rest of the time, 4.0 mini. I am not giving my AI hard problems, because if you want good results out of your models, you need to reduce the complexity. Now you can get away with pretty good, if you're in a scenario where you have a little bit of complexity in a situation and you're okay with like okay results, then fine, throw a harder problem at your AI and then just like adjust the outputs to your needs. That's not what I'm doing 9 times out of 10. 9 times out of 10, I'm telling the AI, hey, here's your inputs. Is this red or is this green? And if you're and when you pick red or green, you need to justify why, so that if you made a mistake, I can go in and make adjustments to your instructions. So DeepSeek V3, the only thing that does for me, it gives me cheaper intelligence, which is fine. But I don't need a smarter model for most of my stuff. When I saw 3V model, I think I lost the context on that thread there. So Whimsical's great. I don't see Mrs. Jones here, but I just want to say thanks, Mrs. Jones. I love this. I was looking to replace Miro. Whimsical's fantastic. I love it. I should color these boxes because they're kind of hard to see. So let's see the blue boxes. The blue is our input, and we're going to say this green is output 1, and this other green is output 2. Whoop, color output, and we'll make our decision orange. Not that. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. Change the color of this. Yeah, I'll say orange. That works. So the orange part is the part that I'm using. There's a simple decision. And again, these could go, this could go even further, right? There could be, let's move that out of the way. We might have another decision. If it's a yes, right, then we might have another decision over here that needs to be made, right? That might go there. So then I'll just be using AI for these little bits here, for the decisions that need to be made in my workflows. That might be lots of times what that looks like, because I do a lot of scraping. We're doing some scraping, right? So one of the things that I'll do is like I'll put in let's see if I've scraped some reviews for a company. I said I'm going to go analyze all your reviews. I want to find out, what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. We're going to categorize it. Let's categorize all of your reviews so we understand what, like, intuitively I think you understand what your customers are upset about, but let's analyze it from a data perspective and fully understand what that looks like. And so when I'm giving a problem to an AI, it's like, hey, here's a review from a customer that's upset. Here's 10 categories that could fall under, pick one. And then once you pick one, be prepared to justify why that you pick that category. And then in that way, it's just like a simple decision. It's like, pick one of these 10 categories and sometimes even pick a second category. That's it. It's a really simple decision. I don't need 7.2 billion parameters for that. Like, I just don't, because, and then I feel like the data I'm getting out of that is generally pretty reliable. That's what I'm looking for. Reliability. Why? Because I'm a software engineer. I tried to get caught up on these comments, but now I'm, Tech Sister says, I use it for user flows and user journey. I think you mean Whimsical, right? Yeah. I just found it. It's fantastic. Thanks again, Mrs. Jones. Going to do a deeper dive. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. I understand now. Great. AI agent for reading form inputs and outputting a result. Hey, Wealthy Systems. Great question. I will typically, forms is easy. There's any kind of number of systems out there that will give you forms that you can, and then I'll use like a make.com probably just to stuff it into, but actually let's have a look at n8n. Does n8n have forms? Because that'd be kind of cool. We'll just do a quick Google on this one, n8n input form, because that's a really common use case for businesses. Like, I know form trigger node documentation. So use the n8n form trigger to start a workflow when a user submits a form. n8n forms. I feel like this is a super common use case, and I work with a lot of businesses like this where they are, they have some manual data intake process, and they just, like, just introducing the business to the idea of like simple form inputs, like, just changes the way that they do things. So on form submission, I didn't even know n8n could do this. Is there we're going to learn this together. Can I just search for form? n8n form. So on new form event, where do I get the form from? Oh, we can get to create the fields right here. I apologize if that's really tiny. I tried to make that bigger, but yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Let's explore this in a minute. I'm just going to try and get caught up on a few more questions, and then we'll explore this. We'll see where this goes. If you want to stick around, give me 2 minutes to get caught up. Jay Lynn says, I want to tell it that I want the software to do, and it gets me started. What I want the software to do. I feel like, Jay Lynn, there's a few systems out there that will probably do what you want these days. I use Cursor, which is a little bit more dev-ish, but you could try Bolt.new or even just Claude, or like, what's that other one? Lovable.net. There's a few out there right now. Lewis asks, what's the best AI for a solutions architect? What problem are you trying to solve? I'm sure there's people developing stuff in that space, but I wouldn't trust any of it until I knew it was actually good. Because if you mean like a cloud solutions architect, or what specific discipline are you talking about? Kenny says, pouring billions into stuff that is impractical. That's the VC industry. That's the startup industry in my experience. Common sense is fascinating, but in the future, many jobs are going to be lost, bigger unemployment queues. I think, yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think as long as we, like, I'm a software engineer and I use AI, and I want to say for the last 10 years, there's always been a challenge to find jobs. I know there's a lot of young people coming out of school having a hard time finding a job. I don't think we're there yet. I mean, I think the industry is going to shift. you're going to have to understand how to use ChatGPT and AI systems, kind of like you need to know how to use spreadsheets. Like, I think you're just going to need to know it a little bit. Deno asked, how's the response time? And I think I missed the thread on that one. You asked about accuracy and response time, and I was talking about something, and I'm not sure. I apologize I didn't get your comment right away. Asa asks, will you post a recording? I put all of my recordings on my YouTube. If you go to there's a link in my bio, you can find my YouTube there, and I'll have the recording of this live up by tomorrow. Milkman, what is a good one for front-end UI design for a mobile app? The coding will be in React Native. I use Cursor, so it just spits out React. I tend to use just component libraries. What's the one I was looking at the other day? I can't think of the name of it. There's enough of them out there that you can just sort of get a pretty decent UI in place if you can get your LLM to spit out code. But you could try, bolt.dev or something like that. Because I'm a developer, I just use like Cursor, which is based on VS Code, which is just like an editor for programming. But I would say any of the major systems should be able to put out decent React code, and then you'll just have to figure out how to plug in the libraries. I haven't played with lovable.dev. I played with bolt.new like the tiniest little bit. But again, I feel constrained by the restrictions within their systems because I work in software, I work in cloud infrastructure, so I can get up and running fairly quick. So I'm not sure I have a great recommendation for you. What do you think of n8n Pro? I haven't used it yet, but I've heard good things about it. Again, I don't need a smarter model. And I'm willing to somebody to prove to me that I think it's probably worth the money. I've heard people say it does a really good job at certain things. But again, for my use cases, I don't need a smarter model. For UI designer, which of the software should I use? I should go find that. UI design, if you're just doing the design yourself, I would use maybe Figma. Figma works great. Well System says, form input software where AI analyzes the inputs to output product recommendations. So you can do this a lot of different ways, right? The way that we approach this, let's take a look at that. I'm going to take a pause on, so I'll just acknowledge real quick, Wet Salt, Adam just came in. Oh yeah, that's Adam asked about n8n. There's a few new questions. Sean and Kenny has a new question. I'll come back to those comments in a minute. I just want to tie into this comment from Wealth Systems. So form inputs where it analyzes the inputs and output product recommendations. So the way you would approach this probably, okay, let's see if we can, we won't have any authentication on this. We'll just say the form title is going to be software where it, if it's, I'm assuming it just based on your name, Wealth Systems, and you're talking about product recommendations, maybe we're going to ask the user some details. So what if we ask them, well, we'll just go like a industry questionnaire. So we'll try this. AIRE, 2 N's in questionnaire. I don't know. Form description, we'll come back to that. Form label, we'll just say, what industry are you in? Question. Field is text type, placeholder, required field. And then if we wanted to add a second field, we could say, let's see, what is your annual revenue? Very personal question, but, and then we'll just pick a number. So that's a required field. We're testing this out on the fly, real time. I've never, and then respond when form is submitted by multi-step forms. We're not doing multi-step, so we'll just leave it at that. I want to test this. You can't see that form that just popped in. What if I grab that URL and put it in a new tab? Can you see it that way? Yeah, so this is the pop-up that I just got. So we just made this form right now together on the fly. So it looks like we can just arbitrarily spin up a form, and I'll just say I'm in the software industry, annual revenue, we'll just say it's 100,000. I think that's 5 zeros. Yeah, that looks right. Submit, form response. We go back in. So we have a submission. Let me see. How do I get out of here now? So once I have that on form submission, then there's a couple things I would want to do. What I would probably do, and I've never done this on n8n, but I'm pretty sure you can do it in n8n. We would do what's called a RAG query, okay? So let's go jump back over to Whimsical because it's going to look like this. Man, Whimsical is my new favorite thing. It's amazing. New board. Close that up. So let's pretend that we have a form input right here. So this is our input, okay? And then what we want to do is we want to have a database. So when our input comes in, we want to do a search. And we'll have a database that's trained on, well, it'll be a vector database, and it'll be trained on our products, okay? This will have our product information in here. Can I make this two-way? Sure can. So basically what will happen is we'll have some inputs. Let's just make this, I don't know, inputs are gray, okay? And then we're going to do a search operation. We have this database that's trained. It's going to reach out to our database. It's going to grab some data and return it. That's the important part. And then probably what it's going to do, and we'll make this one a circle, is it's going to stuff it into like some kind of LLM like ChatGPT. We'll just assume it's, oh, I didn't want that. We'll just assume it's ChatGPT. Make that green because we can. And then from there, what we're going to do is we're going to provide an output. So the whole process, just to give you an idea what that looks like, maybe like a response, okay? The whole process probably looks like this. This is a little bit simplified. Like there could be more to it than this, but this is the way. This is our form. So in that case, the input is like our form is submitted. And then we'll do what's called a retrieval augmented generation, where we do a quick search against our vector database, okay? And all that's going to take some keywords, and the vector database, what it'll do is it'll give us back, like we'll put a bunch of documents here. It'll give us back some of the documents that are relative to the input query. And then we'll take those documents and the original query and we'll stuff that into an LLM like ChatGPT. And the reason we call that augmented is because instead of just having all of the documents in ChatGPT, say you've got 50 documents, if you can tell, rather than having 50 documents in ChatGPT and saying, hey, give me information about XYZ, it'll do an okay job. But if you instead, you only give ChatGPT the 3 documents that are relevant to the query, you retrieve those documents first and you augment the generation with only those documents, you're going to get a lot better result. We call this retrieval augmented generation. RAG, they call it. Because you're augmenting the input for the ChatGPT query. And if you can do that, I saw something, this startup that sold for, I don't know, what was it, 60 million, 600 million, something ridiculous, because they solved this problem. They solved the problem of hallucinations, and they basically did it with RAG by like providing the LLM with exactly the details it needed to form a proper response. Let me get caught up in my comments again, because I think there's probably a couple more here. So, Well System says, would be a great product. Adam says, using O1 right now, it still hallucinates a lot. Doesn't solve problems as well as I'd hoped. Hey, Wet Salt, we're kind of looking at different agentic systems. We're going to take a look at n8n for a little bit, or we're trying to. n8n, and then this one here, Taskade, came up yesterday. And then I've been meaning to tinker with Cassidy. I don't know if we're going to get to all of those today, because my lives tend to move a little bit slow sometimes. We're talking about just different systems and answering questions. Sean says, so you have n8n up? I think n8n, it has some stuff in here that I know I want to use. Like I know, like if we just search for, I know we can do some Postgres in here, right? Integrate with Postgres. I think we can just integrate directly with databases. I've only seen videos of people doing advanced retrieval augmented generation stuff with n8n, and I've been meaning to jump in here and try it out. I'd have to do a little bit more research. And of course you can, probably just tie right into There we go. OpenAI, Llama, so on and so forth. So the question, the use case from Well Systems was to have a form input. So we were just testing that out where we had some inputs on this form. We just built that form really quickly. We can take a second and try and flesh this out a little bit more. We'll just be tinkering. Let's see here. Kenny says, lovable is just okay. You can set up a small proof of concept and get it going in a couple hours, but I think that's all. That's my assumption of how that's going to go, like honestly. And again, I haven't tinkered with this. There's this interesting challenge when it comes to building software. If you just have a simple idea, and people are talking about micro SaaS, micro apps and all that stuff right now, I think that's great. If you can get a micro app up and running, it's making you $5-10 a month or something like that per user, whatever that looks like. But you need to understand the problem with software is infinitely complex. It gets so complex so quickly. And when you just start integrating backends, you need to start talking about authentication, you need to start talking about CDNs, infrastructure, database. If your app grows in any degree of complexity, one of the problems you run into is that databases aren't just interchangeable. If your app is small, then it's fine. You could probably do everything in like Supabase, Postgres, DynamoDB or something like that. But once you get to a certain size, you start partitioning your data for different use cases. And that's a little bit advanced, but there's just complexity that comes with building out SaaS. That's just the reality. So if you can prototype something and get a proof of concept and do the product market fit thing and bootstrap and all of that, like do it. Absolutely. But just be aware you are only going to get so far with something like Lovable. You're only going to get so far with something like Bolt.new because you're going to be constantly fighting the constraints of what you can do within that system. That's my assumption anyway. Andrew says, recently discovered n8n AI agent model and it's pretty incredible. Yeah, it seems pretty good. I'm going to try and tinker with it. Tech Sister says, I was asking if I could use Claude or Cursor, which you would recommend for a UI designer. Oh, I see. Cursor is going to give you Claude inside of an IDE. Cursor, you have to pay. There's a subscription for Cursor once you use up your initial credits. You can access Claude. Let me just pull up Cursor right now. I should have just called the whole thing AI tool chat because that's kind of what we're doing here. So Cursor is built off of a system called VS Code. So this is Cursor right here. Oh, I'm sharing my window. Let me see if I can share. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to see if I can get my, I need to, change that to, I'm brain task switching to how do I adjust my OBS to show this other window. 1 second here. Where is Cursor? That one? Okay. And editor, I put that above and I make that a little bit bigger. Bear with me. I'm just literally doing this on the fly. This is how, this is not how the pros do it. So Cursor is just an editor. This is Cursor right here. And the great thing about this is it's based off of a tool called VS Code, which is just a free open source. Cursor, you got to pay a little bit of money for. But once you get in here, like, you know, for real, we can just go, I don't know, we'll open a folder. 1 second, we'll just go into my sandbox and we'll just create a new folder called live stream testing. And so that's where we're operating right now. And I'll just create a new file. I'm literally, this is not going to do anything. We'll just do, let's see, like a UI.tsx or something like that. And the great thing about Cursor is now I can pull up the composer. This is my composer here. And I don't type anymore. I'll just talk to it and say, in my UI file, can you just spit out some example React code that would give me a contact form for my website? And so here in this little drop down, I can choose which model I want. So I can use Claude 3.5, I can use GPT-4 Mini, o1 Mini, o1, Cursor Small. I think you can tie to custom APIs in this. And then I don't know. I don't have anything set up here. With the composer, it'll just start spitting out a bunch of, right? And so you can pick and choose. If you're using Cursor, you have full control over the environment. So you're going to be installing your own packages and doing all of that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit more to it. AI can definitely help you do that, but you are fully in control of the development environment. So if I just accept that, I mean, this isn't going to run or work because I don't have the environment set up properly or whatever. But I mean, it spit out React. So this is sort of what that's one of the things that I do in my day-to-day job is just use AI to write my code for me. Hope that answered your question. Milkman says, I am new in Cursor, always break my old code when I add a feature. Is there a prompt to use? What you need to do, we didn't really mean to get into dev today, but Milkman, if you're still on the live here, if you're having problem with breaking your old code when you make changes, you don't need a prompt. What you need are tests. You need to go into ChatGPT or something, or in Cursor, and just be like, can we set this up or refactor this with some unit tests so that I can make changes without breaking things I've already built? You need to understand how tests work, and then get ChatGPT or whatever to guide you through that process. Joker says bolt.diy is pretty okay, and DeepSeek is decent for the price. Do you need an embedding model? I have no idea. Adam says, one thing you have to do with Cursor is make a copy of the file each time you make hit a big milestone. Or source control. Look into Git. Adam, I don't know if you're a dev or if you're just trying things out. Boy, we ended up talking about tools. So look into a thing called Git. If you're not familiar with Git, Git is an open source system that version controls all of your stuff. So that if you hit a milestone, what you do is you commit it. And it saves the state of your project at that place and time. And then when you make changes, let's do that right now. Let me pull up my editor again. So if I go into here, I'll just pull up the terminal. I have Git installed. So we're in this live stream testing thing. And if I just say Git status, it'll say it's not a project. So I'll say Git init. Again, you can do this in the editor because if you're using Cursor or VS Code, there are tools for this. I don't use them because I know the command line stuff, but it's this little fork one here. So I can say initialize. Let's do that. I've never used this. Initialize repository. And then, so what it's going to say is it's showing me a list of changes down here. It's saying UI.tsx. So I'm going to click on that. It shows me what the changes are. That I've got all of these new lines. And then if I go hit the plus sign, stage changes. Now that is staged. So if I've changed 10 files, but I only want to commit 2 of them, I can just stage them. And then I'll add a commit message. Initial commit, and I hit commit. And now when I go in and I update this, let's say I've decided that I don't want this to be message, I want it to be messages. Now it's showing me the diff. It's showing me the difference. And so when I go into my, let me save that file. Oh, not that. When I go into this, it's saying that I've made a change. As soon as I save that file, it'll show me that I've made changes. It'll show me what that difference is. I can see the diff. They call that a diff. The red is the old line and the green is the new line. And then I can make those changes. So I would use Git to track those milestones in your project. That's what we use in software engineering. Hope that's helpful. Let me get caught up on a few more of these. Bolt versus Lovable. We sort of chatted about that. I don't have an opinion. I haven't really used them. Others probably will. There's some conversation going on here. Yo, Christofisados. I have an idea for an app. What AI would you recommend? Any of them, honestly. Just jump into something and try it out and see if you can flesh out your idea. That's where I would start. because they'll all largely do decent. They'll get you started. Yeah. V says dead internet theory is already true on you can actually measure it. I believe you. Yeah. I think I saw it wasn't that long ago where they said that internet.org was stopped indexing the internet because there's just too much. It's sad, really. It's not going to slow down, unfortunately. Hamilton just arrived. Are you building an AI agent? We're tinkering with some AI tools. I don't think I can change the name of the stream here today. We're just sort of tinkering with some AI tools. And I should have sort of maybe said AMA, ask me anything. I'm a software engineer who plays with AI stuff. Ask me anything. That's kind of where we're at. Milkman, what breaks? So I have a feature, it's done, and then I add another feature that has nothing to do with. Yeah, you need to look into some testing. I would recommend tools like if it's a browser-based project, you can use a tool called Puppeteer. It is code-based, but you can have AI write the code for your feature. And what it'll do is it'll automate the browser of walking through your project. And the way a test works is that if you're not in software, the way a test works is that you set up a set of conditions that assert or that verify that a particular thing is working. And then when you run it, it runs very quickly. And you can just run it whenever you want. And in software, when we're making changes, we will automate the run of our tests, and we'll have hundreds and thousands of them sometimes for all the different pieces and features to verify that every single thing that we've built is working. We'll have a test for all of those, and we'll have tests at different levels often. And then when we commit that code using Git, like we just talked about, we'll either run those tests manually or we'll even have those tests automated. And we'll get a notification if any of them fails. If any of the tests fails, we know we did something wrong and we got to go in and fix it. So if you get into software, you need to go and ask ChatGPT, what is unit testing? We just do that right now. Chat.openai.com. And we just say, what is unit testing? I am not a dev, but Aaron told me that I need to look into it for my project. And I might say something like, make sure you ask me some clarifying questions so you understand what technology I'm using in my project so that you can help me set up tests. I would start with something like that. And then if you're not familiar with unit testing, I would start with that. And then I would tell ChatGPT, we don't need 01. We can probably just use like 4.0. You can ask ChatGPT or tell Cursor, have them, whatever, work together to get unit tests set up in your project. Tell them that you want to use Puppeteer. Hope that helps. Gift of the Gab says, I do digital marketing and want to create an AI agent to create emails. I would use an AI agent to create email drafts. If you're creating email drafts, I think that's a great idea. And I think I saw this thing, one of the things that we've been trying to do, so we looked at this form submission. So one of the users, I don't know if they're still on the live, Wealth something. Sorry, there's too many usernames. Wealth Systems asked about forms. It'd be cool if you had a form come in and then you could, we were working on an agent yesterday that was doing some web scraping for clients. So my use case is that an email comes in with a booking notification and I want to do a little bit of research on their website. And then I would draft an email. You could 100% do that. I wonder if there's an option in n8n to do like scraping or HTTP. So you can do requests. We would probably want to integrate in a similar way to make.com. We were using Firescraper. I think it was called Firescraper, yeah? Firecrawl, that's what I said. It sounds like a level 3 wizard spell in D&D or something. Firecrawl. We were using this API yesterday, which I think is pretty fantastic so far, to just crawl and grab data off of a client website. And then, to draft an email or some kind of something that you could review before you send it back. Absolutely. That's a good use case for AI. Tier 1 says, sorry if this is not on topic. What's a good tool for building a website? Great question. I use Framer because it's sort of like, whoops. Can I go there without logging in? Oh, maybe I'll just I've used it for a few sites, including my own site. Account, sign out. You can get started for like pretty cheap. Their templates look really great. But there's other stuff. There's like Wix. I would use any website builder. This is good enough. I'm very much a good enough engineer. Like if it's good enough, then we're done. Because a website, unless you're high end in your particular vertical, if you're just like a service person, like home services or financial services or any kind of, the thing that your website needs to do is have your phone number and your contact information. Because if somebody's landing on your website, unless they're coming in on paid ads, then they're actually coming into a landing page. But if they're just coming to your site there, it's because they're looking you up to get a hold of you. So Framer's good. I've used it. The paid plan, it has like a blog built in, components. It does a great job. Even though I'm a software engineer, I don't write anything from scratch these days. I'm always looking for something to do the job, so I don't have to do it. Save on time. So there's a funny joke about how life trying to use AI to hack bank accounts. I believe it. There's a lot of hacking going on with AI right now, unfortunately. Block Boy says, yes, there. I always respond with restrictions and safeguards are the problem. This is live. It's not pre-recorded. You can watch this on YouTube. I'll have it posted on my YouTube probably tonight. Usually by the next day, I'll have it live. So if you go check out, there's a link in the bio. You can find my YouTube over there. This is peak TikTok automation. Okay. For example, using AI to rob a crypto platform. Yeah, that's bad actors going to act bad. So the AI is not to blame. It's the people driving the AI. Gift of the Gab says, I work for a charity and want to allow people to insert content and red flags to generate donations. Be happy to help you out or give you some pointers. Feel free to reach out to me, Gift of the Gab. You can just, my TikTok's open to DMs. Just send me a message. I'd be more than happy to help you out, get something set up. Okay, the problem is always hiding prints in the snow. I think I lost the thread on that one. Framer doesn't have any crawl engines. I'm not sure what your question is there. Framer is a little bit limited in terms of its functionality. Once you get in, you can add blogs or what they call CMS, and you have full control over that layout. And they are SEO friendly. They have a lot of great features in there. It's good enough for me. Kenny, I have automations in Make where I scrape the website, use Perplexity to research and craft customer emails. I think it's fantastic. The only thing I recommend against, and I'm sure, Kenny, you're not doing this, but I don't automatically send emails. I only, like you said, craft them, like draft them. If you haven't seen it, I have this, anybody who's new to the live, welcome, by the way. My name's Aaron. I'm a software engineer. My background's in software engineering. Nowadays I do business consulting and AI and automation. Tech strategy is kind of my passion, and scraping. I like to scrape stuff. But if you go to my TikTok, well, I mean, you're here. But if you go back in my bio, let's see if I can find my bio here. View profile, go back a little bit. And down in here, I should pin the post. Let me see. This one here, risk and complexity. I've done a couple videos on this risk complexity framework, and I'll go back and pin them. There's one here, and then there's one a little bit further down where I talk about this one right here. Should I be using AI? And this video is specifically talking about what I call a risk complexity framework, where if you are in a scenario where there is a high risk, meaning you need to ask yourself the question, if this goes horribly wrong, what is the worst that could happen? What is the worst thing that could happen in this scenario? If there's any degree that there's some impact on your business, then you need to use AI cautiously. And just automatically sending emails off to people without being in the loop, that's high risk for me. Crawl issues. Oh, I see. Framer doesn't have any crawl issues. Not that I'm aware of. In fact, if we go, they automatically generate a sitemap and everything. So yeah, they're pretty good. I've used it minimally for my own site because I'm still building it out, but I've used it for a couple customers and I'm happy with it. I'm not an SEO specialist or anything. Again, it does good enough. We rank and it crawls fine. It seems to be good. What do you specialize in your day job? In your normal job? So my background's in software engineering. I spent the last, I don't know, 12 or 13 years doing infrastructure, automation for teams. Actually, so the things that I do now for businesses is what I used to do for teams. We call it kind of DevOps, but it's really just like helping make sure we have best practices within an organization and allow teams to launch their products faster. We also focus on communication, um, bridging the gap between different boundaries in an organization. What that means is every business has the same two problems. Like every single business has like exactly the same two problems. One is change and one is communication. And so I focus on those two things. How can we make it easier to communicate, and how can we make it easier to manage change? Casey said, I meant being search engine friendly, correct? Yeah, I think it's fine. It works good for what I need. Positive thing about AI now is that it knows the difference between right and wrong. I'm not sure about that. I don't think AI is intrinsically biased based on the inputs. So it only knows right and wrong if it's being trained that way. And then right and wrong is kind of subjective. So I don't know. There's a whole conversation there. Let's kind of dodge that one for now. Gift to the Gab. Awesome. Yep. That's great. We'll connect here shortly and we'll see where we can get with that. Michael, honestly, it seems with these automation tools, you can build entire SaaS with secure backend. Maybe. I'm willing to believe that you could. I would not. There are some. Milkman, I'll come back to that question in a minute. Change management. There's some things that you're going to run into trouble with. You can get quite a ways with the automation tools that are out there right now. The problem you're going to run into is that when you actually gain some traction, you get some users. If your back end is built out, especially like an API or something, or you start ramping up customers, and you're in a tool like Make.com or Zapier for your back end, your costs are going to skyrocket really fast because they're not meant for scale. They're meant for prototyping. So once you start, and that's a good problem to have, arguably, if you get to the point where you're making money and like you're like, damn, this is costing us a lot of money. Like that's a good problem to have, but you're gonna start pivoting really quickly. So typically that's where I use that, like Make.com or even n8n or something like that. Get something in place that's either low use and low cost. This is low cost because I can get it set up quickly. Like we didn't get anywhere with this thing. We were just looking at n8n a little bit, like what are some of the options in here. But if I can get set up in here, connect 3 different systems within an hour and have a working functional thing for a client that's good enough, then that's an hour, 1 hour of my time. Let's say if my time's worth $50 an hour, $100 an hour, whatever that is. If I need to engineer this from scratch and then spin up some infrastructure somewhere and get it in a serverless system and set up the document on all of this other stuff, like minimum a day, minimum probably 3 days, right? So I can get something up and running very quickly in this. If it gets to the point where they're using it 50 times an hour and there's like 50 nodes and it's starting to get really expensive, then we'll be like, okay, let's do cost analysis here. Maybe it makes more sense to like, let's get something in a serverless system where we're not paying paying a whole bunch of money to some third party for this. Like, we'll customize it for you. So there's always trade-offs in software. There's always trade-offs. So you can get pretty far with SaaS, but yeah, just be mindful that also the other thing you need to keep in mind is like, these systems are organized. Make.com, Zapier, n8n, they're not designed to be super secure out of the gate. That's another thing you need to consider. What data are you bringing in? Where are you sending it? They're not regulating any of that. If you're in a proper software engineering context where you have a product, you have a security team, where you have somebody on your team that is responsible for making sure that you have security in mind. Like, you're not collecting, we call it toxic waste, but like private information, credit cards, like you're not collecting any of that stuff. You're storing things properly, right? So there's a lot of considerations. You can get started, but you're not going to run your business forever with just like some automation tools. Milkman, do change management. Sort of. I enable change management. I don't do change management. I sort of enable change management. But that's a whole conversation. So Joker says, Sean Evans, photography. If you are still here, a converter upserter is perfect for Bolt or Lovable. That's cool. V says right and wrong are complicated. But if you are reading code, it's my observation. Okay. Ticking Tog. Can you start again? We haven't really, we've mostly been chatting. We haven't got too far. We're just looking at n8n. I want to dig into this more. If you have anybody here has recommendations about tools that you're using that you love for automation or for agents, I actually want to let's jump over to Cassidy. I don't think I have an account here. I wonder if I can just get in with my. Yeah, let's do that. Let's just jump in with my Google account. Create a new chat. Is this specifically for chat? Let me bump that up. It seems pretty small. And this is another one I haven't used too much. I have used cases where I can use an agent for sure. Like agent, and earlier on, somebody, called us out and said, agents are fully autonomous. These are more like assistants. That's fine. I don't need it to be autonomous. But what I'm constantly doing, because we've been tinkering for a couple days on this other project. Let's just pop that open for a second. This one here, the personal assistant. We've been tinkering on this one for a couple days. Not that one, this one. Where we've built out some scenarios in make.com. We've got one scenario here that receives a booking email. That scenario, through the use of an LLM, through ChatGPT, can kick off a second scenario to scrape a website. Then we have another scenario that handles that website via webhook. And our goal was to build out a database, a custom vector database and a custom assistant for that client specifically. That was my goal. We didn't get that far. I'm still committed to seeing this project through. But I thought today, you know what? I got people, saying, hey, check this out, try that out. We got a couple people mentioning different tools. So I thought, let's have a look at some of these tools today. Let's dive in a little bit and see if we can build something. Because I don't know. I've never played too much with Cassidy, but I keep hearing about it. But again, if you have a tool that you like, let me know. I've tinkered with LangChain. Yeah. And I think they have a cloud version. Looks super cool. I've used their self-querying retriever for some RAG stuff. Yeah. Let me just catch up on a few comments here. V says, I can run a program for some time getting data for limited time on that issue, but it's not definite. Vincent says, who's setting up SaaS on n8n? Michael, is n8n or make costs wise when scaling? If you, your MVP is going to be fine. If you have a prototype, you could build a prototype, a reasonable prototype on say like n8n or, because effectively when you get into make.com, let me just pop open make.com. Let's get in there for a second. For all intents and purposes, if you're in make.com, log in, and we create we'll just pull up any scenario here, really. Not chatbot. Let's pick on the website crawler. For all intents and purposes, this is an API. If we look at this webhook endpoint here, there's a URL, which we can effectively hit like an API endpoint, and it returns a response, and it does work in the middle. So you could in theory, build out a bunch of API endpoints as a backend for your SaaS prototype on make.com. The problem is, if you got 100 users using this a lot every day, this is going to get very expensive, very fast. So when you go for your seed round or whatever, you be prepared to pivot into code probably right away. Because all of these systems, all of n8n, make.com, Zapier, the only one, Late Node is the only one that's cheap, but they still charge by execution time, and still it would be too expensive to run an actual application. You're going to be using like serverless and like Python or JavaScript or something in the back end. So just plan for that. Get your prototype up and running, yes, because you can do that quickly. Sean says, gonna have to go check out Bolt and Lovable, paying for n8n right now. That's the one thing I noticed about n8n. It's a little bit pricey. They want you to come in at like, what, $70 a month? And it looks like you can do lots. I'm gonna have to be convinced. I'm gonna have to be convinced that it's 20 euros, sorry. So I'd be willing to try that out. I need to know it does something that Make doesn't do for me right now. We might have to tie into that a little bit more. See how far we can get with it. All right. Ticking Talk says, I'm a wedding photographer. Any obvious uses for automation or agents? Intake comes to mind. So if you have any like um, lead generation, or if you have any data intake where you have people who are interested, and if you maybe you don't, but if you have questionnaires that you want, if you have a standard list of questions that you want to ask any of the clients that you're about to do photography for, you could have it so that as soon as they sign up, it automatically sends them a form, and then that intake data comes in. And then you could, that's not really AI, but it's like it could come in and automatically do some stuff depending on what your processes are internally. Um, Again, same kind of thing. If you have any upsells, if you have any funnels, as far as the actual photo, editing, which is a time-consuming portion, I don't know that there's necessarily you could automate some of that process depending on how much creative touch, but more so on the client touch points where you're either doing data intake or you're sending off something or you're selling something or you're doing any kind of whatever. There's automations around those portions I think you could do. Um, a really good automation for photographers, I would consider something like win back campaigns. So if you have, and it's not necessarily using AI again, though you could get crafty with AI. When you're hitting specific seasons, if you want to start booking, you do weddings specifically, but if you did really for any kind of photography, people don't typically get married again per se right away. But if you have a customer database, um, at certain times of year, especially if you do like family photography or any of that kind of stuff, you could do campaigns where you're like, hey, I'm booking into fall. Like it's July and you're like, I'm booking into September, October for, yada, yada. You could be doing those kinds of things, reaching back out to your customer database. So there's a few options there. FAQ chatbots for your site and stuff. People have questions about like, how much does it cost? What's your process? Anything that would be in an FAQ, you could put in a chatbot and use AI for that. I'm sure there's more use cases there. V says learning and breathing code in like Neo in the Matrix, a real scenario that makes sense if on a mission. For sure. Michael, yeah, just trying to minimize infrastructure costs, keeping the prototyping phase. Definitely just you could consider your time when you talk about costs too. If you're going to hire a software dev right away, that's going to get expensive. John Javier, hope I say that right. Found anything worthwhile? I don't think I understand the question. Mojo, just use Zapier. Sure. Why not? Pock Shop and Sell. What website would you recommend to upload a front-end HTML, CSS, and a back-end Python file? What are you trying to build? You have options. If you must use, front-end, back-end, and you're managing all of that, the thing about it is your front-end HTML and CSS will not be able to talk to the back-end unless you set up a Python, like a server that knows what to do with Python. Like if you basically need a WSGI server or something like that, and some kind of framework to serve that, it's a little bit more than just uploading the files. So that's the kind of thing where like I would recommend. I don't use front end, back end Python and HTML anymore. I will typically, when I'm building out a site, I'll use something like next.js, which is in React, and then you can write your front end, your back end in React, and just host it on Netlify, and you don't need to worry about the back end. You're going to pay $20 a month, but everything's just kind of in one code base, and it's nice. There's more to just like having Python running on your server side. If you need the Python file to be on the server, you have options, but you need to start looking at a server on the back end. And then you need to not only have like your WSGI or whatever process, you need to have like Nginx or Apache or something serving that. Like it gets complicated. 20 for the cloud and n8n from Sean. Free if you host it on Docker. Couldn't get my Google credentials to work. Yep. I'd probably just pay the 20 for n8n because honestly, by the time you do all the tinkering with Google Cloud, like if you really want to, that's fine. You got to factor your time into that as well. Right? Roma says, I want to start on my DevSecOps consulting business. Any suggestion or advice? Yeah, interesting. DevOps, SecOps. I guess it depends. If you're just getting the consulting business, anybody who's just thinking about getting into consulting, I would say you probably got to be doing like TikTok or some kind of social media. The best way to prove your value, reach out through your network. You're basically, if you have the skills, then you have a marketing problem. If you don't have the skills, I'd say then what you need to do is get involved in open source projects and make contributions that way, so you can start building out a bit of a network and building out your skills, and then maybe find an internship. It depends if you already have the skills or not. So V says, as you know, using AI for coding is not a plug and play. It's a learning curve is sharp. It is. I think so. It is pretty sharp. But the learning curve for coding is, yeah, it's just sharp because there's a lot. It's a multifaceted problem. Tech is a very broad field. Coding is a very broad field. There's a lot of moving parts. Sean, I set Claude AI agent shared email with n8n, help with the responses and forward prompts. That's cool. V says, I'm trying to learn how to use AI to mirror something to perfection. Sounds interesting. Is there any low-hanging fruit as far as auto agents are concerned in terms of generating money? Great question. I think there's a lot of, I don't know about that term low-hanging fruit. I'm firmly of the opinion that if you can solve a problem, and you can communicate that, if you can solve a problem that drives value into business, then there's your low-hanging fruit. And the one problem that lots of businesses have is time. Another problem lots of businesses have is social media. There are a lot of businesses out there where they're older business owners that they've been in business 20, 30 years. They're thinking about retiring or selling the business or whatever they're doing. They have no notion about any of this stuff. They're just busy, and they don't know how to get away from their business. They don't know how to detach themselves from their business. I think there's a ton of opportunity out there right now, especially if you're getting into, you know, I know a fellow I met someone recently who, what they do is they create custom GPTs and they just sell them they add people to their teams. They create very specific GPTs within their niche that are trained on like regulations and different things or whatever. And then they sell those as a subscription to businesses, right? So there's quite a bit of opportunity out here with a little creativity. Mac or PC guy? I am currently on a Mac. I like the Mac hardware. I like the Mac ecosystem. I eventually finally bought an iPhone. I enjoy the way things sync up. I've used all of them. I used to be a PC. I've used Windows, used Linux for a long time. But yeah, I enjoy Mac right now. Muffin says, don't have 20 right now. That's unfortunate. That creates a challenge. Yari, what could be the best option to connect Airtable with SendGrid to send email marketing emails? Great question. You could probably get away with make.com, right? If you get into make, just have a trigger on a particular field. Let's just set up a new scenario here real quick. Brand new scenario. Because you can get a free make account and get so many, not make, sorry, Airtable. You can just integrate directly with Airtable, watch records. Once you're connected to something, I think you can, I've got one here, Gmail base. I have no idea what's in it. But if a field changes, then you can start to set up conditions around what would trigger things off. And then from there, once you've got that connected, you said you were using SendGrid, right? So then, SendGrid in here? Yep. So then from here, let's see, create a list, get all bounces, validate, send an email. Something like that would be fairly straightforward. You're going to pay for it, but I mean, you only spent 5 minutes setting it up, so. Joker, I hadn't coded since Perl until about 8 months ago. Man, I spent about 5.5 years in Perl, in the tens. I worked for a team that the old guard team was acquired. The new team was in Python. The old team was in Perl. I did unit testing in Perl. Was my own framework because I had to write it. Yeah, it was an adventure. Perl. Super interesting. V says, from Will Smith eating to mirroring multiple websites. Mirroring multiple websites in seconds is quite the leap. Yeah, things are moving fast. Glorified Tales. Can you give examples of any custom GPTs you mentioned earlier?